Season 3 of the hit HBO show Crashing was a really good one, but in case you missed it, here's a quick recap. Season starts out with Pete touring the country, doing to different colleges. These are the colleges that he picked up during the NAFTA conference, and Pete honestly is living his best life. He's just loving it. The last college he ends up going to, they actually have an opener for him, and this is a first for Pete. He gets really excited, gets to know the kid a little bit, but when the kid opens for him, the kid absolutely kills. So, at the end of the event, Pete ends up taking this kid out to lunch and saying, "You only live in Maryland, you got to get up to New York more. In fact, why don't you just come with me and come to New York and you can test out your comedy there." The kid's name, by the way, is Jabuki. So Pete and Jabuki head off to New York City, and Pete's really selling this kid on New York City, which is laughable because you don't really need to sell anybody on New York City. But at one point, Pete even says, "Yeah, this is my city." And obviously, we know at this point it's not Pete's city. But he's telling the kid about the legendary Comedy Cellar and about how once you're in there, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can do 5 minutes a night, 20 minutes a night, 30 minutes a night. But to get a tryout at the Comedy Cellar, somebody has to vouch for you, and somebody has vouched for Pete. So that's the reason why Pete is heading home. He has a tryout with the Comedy Cellar. And the person who ends up vouching for Pete in this situation is Artie Lang, his friend. So Pete's going to end up doing a 5-minute set, and if all goes well, he'll be accepted, and then he can just do comedy there whenever he wants. But before the tryout, Pete wants to kind of show off Jabuki around the city, and one of the places he takes him is the Boston, the old club that he used to pitch flyers for. So he walks in there, he introduces Jabuki to a few people, and then he sees Allie sitting in the corner. So he goes up to Allie and starts to apologize to her for acting like an asshole and how their relationship ended up ending. He tells her about his tryout at the Comedy Cellar and invites her to the event. And they seemingly have patched things up a little bit. But now to the big tryout. Pete gets up there, and it's kind of obvious he's a little bit nervous and really excited. And he does a good set, but when he comes back, he finds out that Jabuki is also on the card because Jabuki ends up knowing Michelle Wolf through his sister. So Jabuki follows up Pete and absolutely kills. They then go up and talk to the club manager who tells Pete, "Yeah, you're not ready." But when she looks at Jabuki, she tells him, "You are ready." And one of the issues is Pete does a very generic set on peeing in the pool, whereas Jabuki really talked about himself in the set. And the club manager even brings up, "I have tons of white guys talking about nothing." So Pete thought that he was going to mentor this kid, and in this situation, the pupil ended up leapfrogging the teacher. He's really downtrodden, depressed. He goes outside and he sees Allie there, who tells him, "Hey, great job, you killed," and he starts screaming at her, "Are you fucking with me?" And he's really just taking his anger out on Allie in this situation, screaming about how he worked so hard for the last 6 months, and she just laughs at him. So the relationship that he's somewhat seemingly mended is now on the fritz again. Episode 2 kicks off with an awkward situation that I know a lot of people can probably relate to. It's giving your ex back the things that he or she left in your apartment. And that is the situation that Pete finds himself in. He's giving Allie all the things that she left in his apartment before they broke up. And Pete's trying to be the friendly guy because he realizes he was such a jackass the last time he saw her. And in the middle of her conversation, a new guy walks up and it ends up being Allie's new boyfriend, who's a pretty funny guy. He's got a dry sense of humor. I liked him. I'd hang out with him. But during this whole conversation, he reveals that Allie booked the late night show with Seth Meyers. And this is obviously coming on the heels of Pete not getting into the Comedy Cellar, so you can understand why she didn't exactly bring this up, especially because of the way she booked it. She booked it through appearing at the Comedy Cellar. At the end of their encounter, she tells him that he's got to return the jacket he's wearing because it's a douchey-looking jacket. So Pete ends up heeding her advice and heading over to the store where he bought the jacket to return the jacket. And while he's doing so, or at least trying to do so, he sees a woman there who tells him that he should actually keep the jacket, and he looks good in the jacket. Pete ends up shooting a shot with this woman, asks her to go to get coffee together. Coffee leads to sex because that's always how it works. The sex in the dressing room led to the sex in the bathroom. Once again, that's how it always works. But eventually Pete has to take a break from all the sex that he's having, so he ends up trying to go around and pick up some shows, and he's realizing the market for him is not exactly as hot as he thought it would be. So he ends up heading to a laundromat of all places to see if he can get some set time, and it's actually a pretty solid show because Greg Fitzsimmons is appearing there, and the guy says, "Yeah, man, come back in like 4 months, we'll have a spot." But he ends up seeing a comedian that he does know who ends up bringing up if he ever thought about appearing at a synagogue. Even though Pete's not Jewish, he ends up doing the show at the synagogue, and he does a phenomenal job. And at the show is the girl he was having sex with, and the girl's name is Kat. At the end of the show, a woman said that he should really think about just doing comedy at church groups, and the two comedians who were there say that the rabbi wants to meet with him, but Pete blows them off completely to go hang out with this new woman. By the way, just a side note, the woman is not a 10, but Pete Holmes is like a 2. and he continues to get women that are way, way, way out of his league. And it's just an annoying feature of the show because he kind of looks like a Muppet. And this is the second woman that I don't think would give him the time of day. Okay, we're moving on to episode 3, where it's been 3 weeks since Pete and Kat have been seeing each other. And things are really good right now in their relationship. They go out to get coffee, and she says, "Where is this going?" He thinks that she means the relationship, but she says, "No, your career." And he completely lies. He says, "I'm just happy being a club guy right now. I'm good where I am." But she wants to dig deeper. She says, "You have way bigger aspirations than being just some random club DJ. You want to walk into a room and everybody knows who you are." He does end up confiding in her that he has an idea for a television show that's focused around a guy who ends up teaching school in his garage. And the show is called Homeschool because his name obviously is Pete Holmes. But they end up parting ways. She ends up going to a workout class. He goes back to his apartment, and Leaf is just sitting in his apartment. We have no idea how he got in. But Leaf has an invite to a party with Lorne Michaels. If you're unaware, Lorne Michaels is the creator of Saturday Night Live. And Pete turns the invite down. I can't get over how stupid of a move this is, especially on the heels of what happened at the Comedy Cellar. But Pete doesn't want to go to a party with a guy who can change his life. Okay, hey, to each his own. So instead of hanging out with Lorne Michaels and possibly changing his career, he ends up hanging out with this girl, Kat, where he reveals to Kat that she's kind of his fantasy, and that leads to creating vision boards for the future. Once again, instead of changing his career, he decides to make a vision board like he's in 3rd grade. Once again, to each his own, whatever. One of the things he put on the vision board was Ray Romano, the guy from Everybody Loves Raymond, the guy that nobody has on their vision board. After Ray Romano is comfortably placed on the vision board, they go off for a night of debauchery. They stop on the sex store where Pete is completely uncomfortable. And then she says that she got tickets to go see a show at the Comedy Cellar. Pete does not want to go. He doesn't want to be sitting in the crowd when he's a comedian because his worst fears come true. They end up going to the show, and he gets roasted by every single comedian that goes up there. She claimed the reason that she got the tickets to the Comedy Cellar was for Pete to face his fears, but the whole night his head is in his hands as he's trying to hide from every single comedian's wrath. And by the way, all the comedians are joking around with Pete in good fun. It's not like this is malicious intent or anything, but it's still embarrassing nonetheless. After the show, they come upstairs and Pete has a really good laugh with all the comics who are roasting him. But Kat at this point is kind of drunk. And she starts trying to defend her man, telling them that Pete is so much funnier than all of them and how he can do a better job than them. And it's a pretty cringeworthy moment. And because of that, he quickly ushers her out of the room. And as they're leaving the bar, who is there but Ray Romano? With Kat urging on, he ends up going up to Ray Romano, introducing himself and telling Ray Romano that Ray is his idol and how he put a picture of Ray Romano on his vision board, and he ends up revealing the idea of Homeschool, the TV show, to Ray Romano, who tells him it's a little bit creepy because the problem with Homeschool is it's all centered around a kid who stopped going to school and started getting homeschooled by a guy in his garage, and he tells all the kids in the neighborhood that he's getting a better education in the garage school. So basically, Ray Romano tells him it's kind of creepy that the basis of your show is a guy luring kids to his garage. At the end of the episode, she wakes him up at about 2 a.m., takes him to a random corner of New York, and a bus goes by with a billboard on the side of it that says Homeschool coming soon with Pete's face on it, as she tries to instill in him that this dream could become a reality. Episode 4 starts out with Pete and Jason, by the way, if you're unfamiliar, was the manager of the bar, the Boston, that Pete used to try to get sets for. So Pete and Jason are on a road trip to a bar in New Jersey where Jason will be headlining, and they're doing 2 nights, so they have to stay at a condo. And when they get there, Allie's there. Now, it's not awkward or anything. She's going to be appearing on the bill, but Pete didn't know that she was going to be there. And Jason is being a dick, and look, if you watch the show, you already know he is a dick, but he's just being a dick to Allie and kind of putting her down and just being a D-bag, who is doing this show because she wants to try out the set that she's going to do on Seth Meyers. But when they get to the club, they realize it's not the club that Jason thought it was going to be. I guess the club previously had been a little looser with the rules, but the new management at this club is very, very stringent and strict. They're taking themselves way too seriously. And they tell Allie that she's going to be the opener. She has 10 minutes, no more, no less, and she has to read off all these specials, and they even took the liberty of writing some jokes for her, so they're treating her with complete disrespect. Pete will be the middle act. He'll be doing 25 minutes, and then Jason is headlining the show. And Jason's act is painful to listen to. It's not even close to being funny, and it's borderline just inappropriate in every way, even for comedy standards. When they come back the next day, the club tells Jason that he is now going to be doing the middle, and Pete will be headlining the show. Allie, who's going to be appearing on national television, well, she's still just the opener. Even though she does try to get that lead spot because of the fact she'll be on Seth Meyers, they just kind of push her to the side. So at this point, Allie's pretty pissed off, and she gets up there and starts reading these menu specials, and you got Jason, who's been belittling her for 2 days at this point, and she rips his entire set. His set has to do with consent and about how it's ridiculous how much the world is focusing on consent. And Allie takes the opposite approach and torches any guy who has Jason's viewpoint. So when Jason gets up there, he doesn't really have a set because anything he says, he's going to look like an asshole. So Jason completely bombs. He heads back to the green room, and he starts hitting on the green room waitress. And just like his set, he can't take no for an answer. She's obviously not into him, and he keeps pursuing and persisting. And finally, she just loses her shit. She says to him, "This is why nobody wants to work this gig, because all you guys think that we want you when we don't. We just want to do our fucking jobs and get through the night." This has been the greatest example of art imitating life on this show. He begs her not to tell the club manager, and then says, "By the way, you kind of hit on me first." To which she just pushes the drinks right into him because she did not hit on him first. He knows that. She knows that. The audience knows that. Jason's a dick. After the set, Allie and Jason get into a huge screaming match. Jason's pissed off because Allie torpedoed his set. And he's kind of playing the victim, and Allie says, "Don't even try playing the victim. You're a white guy in this society. You don't get to play the victim. You need to take some accountability for what just happened." So Allie storms off. Pete and Jason drive home. And Pete has decided to take the woman's advice from a couple episodes ago and embark on a mini religious tour. Now, one of the things that we did not talk about in episode 4 was the fact that Kat was none too thrilled when she found out that Pete's ex-girlfriend was in the same room. So she's kind of territorial, and Pete's going to take her on this little mini leg of the Christian tour. And one of the places that they're going to stop is Pete's home to meet Pete's parents. This is the first girl that Pete is bringing home since his wife. Now, if you remember from season 1, his mom is fucking weird. She's a helicopter mom, bubble wrap mom, still treats her son like he's 4 years old mom. Very weird relationship they have. And a lot of this episode has to do with the weird dynamic that him and his mom have. And the fact that she can't really let go of the fact that he's no longer her little boy, and now she's Kat's man. Throughout the episode, his mom is nitpicking Kat here and there, and then finally it hits a crescendo at the end of the comedy show where Pete's mom calls out Kat for not wearing a bra in church. Kat ends up getting the final laugh, though. At night, she leaves the room that she was supposed to sleep in, goes into Pete's childhood room, and ends up having sex so loudly as to wake up everybody in the house, including the mom. And let me tell you, she succeeds. The next morning when Pete comes down, his mom tells him, "You know she was faking it, right?" Just further adding to this weird relationship that him and his mom have. Honestly, episode 5 is kind of a forgettable episode, so we'll just move right along to episode 6. Pete tells Kat that he's going to head to a viewing party at the Comedy Cellar for Allie, who just did Seth Meyers. At this point, we've come to realize that Kat is extremely jealous and territorial. She kind of gets up in arms and invites herself a little bit. When she finally meets Allie, she's the typical jealous girlfriend who's really fake. So nice to her. "Oh my God, it's so nice to meet you," and complimenting her, but in reality, she absolutely hates her because this is Pete's former girlfriend. Later on in the night, as they're waiting for Seth Meyers to start, Pete heads to the bar and sees Leaf and wonders, "What the hell are you doing here?" Leaf tells Pete that Allie and Pete's ex-wife became really good friends and Allie invited them. To which Pete kind of throws his hands up in the air and goes, "Are you kidding me? I have my ex-wife, my ex-girlfriend, and my current girlfriend all in the same room." But Leaf is always so great at spinning this stuff and says, "This is so great. You have 3 women that you were lovers with all here. That's amazing." Because Leaf can't see that, no, that's a shit show. So Pete's pretty on edge, but finally the episode comes on and Allie's doing her set. And in the middle of the set, Kat asks Pete a question and Pete shushes her saying, "Hey, just ask me whatever you have to ask me after the set. It's rude to Allie." And Kat just continues to be really loud and rude and insulting. And one of the things that Allie is talking about in the set is how bad her ex-boyfriend was in bed. So Kat decides it's a good idea to corner Allie in the bathroom and confront her and ask if that joke was about Pete. And then state that, well, Pete always comes for Kat, and it's never an issue, and he's always hard for Kat. Kat leaves the bathroom, and it's just Allie and Pete's ex-wife in the bathroom at this point. They kind of look at each other like, Jesus, Pete is in trouble with this girl. Eventually, Pete and Kat have a big argument in the middle of the street. Kat storms off, and the episode ends with Pete coming home and kind of looking at her, and it's starting to hit that maybe she isn't the one. So in episode 7, Pete ends it. He texts Kat, says it's over, to which she responds with a lot of curse words, and let's just say she's not taking it well. But Pete is now focused on this Christian comedy tour that he's on. He's making a ton of money at this tour. More money than he's ever made in his comedy career. But there's an issue. They're being a little bit restrictive. The woman who runs the comedy tour gets mad when Pete says pissed, because apparently it's against his contract, but she does want Pete to come to a local morning radio show to promote the show. And Pete gets excited. He agrees. He goes on the show. And while he's on there, in stops a comedian that he knows from New York City. After the interview, she invites Pete to go out to lunch, and they head off. And Pete's kind of asking permission in a way for him to do this comedy tour. He feels like he might be selling out a little bit by doing it. And he even confides in her that when she walked in the room, he felt like the cool kid was catching him in the act. She says, look, that's completely understandable. Whatever you want to do for money, that's cool. You know, I myself have done tours where, you know, I'm not telling them I'm a lesbian because they wouldn't agree with those morals, but don't be funnier outside of the show than you are on stage. So Pete really takes this to heart, and the very next set he does, he absolutely kills. The problem is the language he's using isn't appropriate. He's in a church talking about Cain killing Abel, stabbing him, really highlighting the negative aspects of the Bible, but doing it in a funny way. At the end of the show, he walks out, and she says, you know I have to fire you, right? And he goes, yeah. So Pete has to leave the show, leave $1,000 a show, and head back to New York City. As he gets back to New York City, he has to meet with Kat, kind of do a post-breakup interview sort of thing. And Kat reads him the riot act, saying that he used her and that 10 years down the line, he'll regret this decision and she'll realize that she dodged a huge bullet. And then she just walks out of his life, hopefully forever. And then to make matters worse, there's a group of women comedians who are sitting around the bar, one of them being Amy Schumer. And at the end of it, they all just start roasting Pete. So we're on to the season finale where things are actually looking up for Pete at this point. Because he gets a call from Kevin, his manager, to go meet him at an Italian restaurant where Kevin is just eating by himself, being very Godfather-esque dramatic. But he tells Pete that John Mulaney wants him to open for him. And he requested Pete by name. This is the biggest show that Pete has ever done. It's at a place in New York City called Town Hall. And the fact that John Mulaney asked for him by name is huge because Pete only met him once, and it was in season 2, and that conversation didn't really go so well. Pete calls Allie to tell her that he's going to be doing the show with John Mulaney, and Allie tells Pete that she broke up with her boyfriend. He was a little too perfect, she says. You can kind of see where this is leading to. But Pete heads to the show. He's excited. He's sitting in his dressing room. And John Mulaney's assistant comes and finds Pete in his dressing room and says that John wants to see him and meet him. And when they go down there, it's pretty clear there's an issue because John Mulaney has no idea who the hell Pete is. Pete's trying to explain that, yeah, we met one time. And John's like, yeah, that's great, but I have no idea who you are. I know who you are now because you're introducing yourself, but you're not the person that I wanted for this gig. Come to find out, there's another comedian named Holmes who John met in Chicago, and he's the guy who John wanted to do this set. At this point, John and his assistant, in front of Pete, start spitballing possible comedians that they can get to open for John Mulaney on short notice. John calls Pete back to his dressing room and explains to him, hey, man, I'm sorry, there was an issue. But it's pretty obvious that what John is focused on is his public image, because he keeps telling Pete, yeah, we don't need people to know about this because they're going to think I'm an asshole, and I'm not an asshole, and they don't need to know what happened here. So he's really not focused on being sorry for the mix-up. More so, he's trying to make sure that Pete doesn't go around and tell stories about John Mulaney being a jerk. Pete kind of just sunkenly walks back to the green room, sitting there, and then the assistant shows up again, asking him, hey, man, you got to clear out. You can stay for the show, but you got to clear out. The problem is, none of the comedians they're calling can get to the show on time. And John is forced to use Pete. And Pete shines. Pete gets up there and completely torches John Mulaney. He starts telling the entire story about how John is literally calling other comics in front of him to replace him on this card. He makes the point that if you're looking for someone to be not nearly as funny as John Mulaney, Pete should be the first person you call. He kills it. He walks off, and luckily John Mulaney isn't pissed at all because John says, hey, you made the set better. I didn't think that you were going to be that funny, and you were. So John asks him if he wants to go to the Comedy Cellar with a few other comedians after the show, and they head over there, and John vouches for Pete. to the manager that he met in episode 1 and says, look, I didn't think this guy was going to be funny, and honestly, the first time I met him, I couldn't stand him, but if you give him a chance, he is hilarious. He killed tonight. So Pete gets up there having no expectations whatsoever on getting accepted into the Comedy Cellar and just is a natural. He doesn't try too hard. He does a really good set, and when he comes up, the manager of the Comedy Cellar reluctantly lets him in. Instead of going out and getting food with John Mulaney afterwards, he decides to call up Allie and meet up with her, where he ends up kissing her and walking off. All right, this is the lazy part of the episode where I ask you guys to like and subscribe or leave comments or do whatever, or not. You probably checked out already. But if you're still here, it would be cool. And if you do want another show review, just leave it in the comments section.